Whoa, there I am. I would like to welcome you all back to the IE427 garage. Today we are going to get all of the remaining little itsy bitsy nitpicky little things that we need to get done in order to get this thing fired up. I don't think that's going to happen in this video, meaning that we're going to fire it. However, we've got some things that just have to be taken care of before then. We have to set the fuel pressure. We have to get the Holley system programmed. I've got a couple of just little electronic gremlins. I have an issue with the alternator, and I want to see if I can get that straightened out before we first start it. See if I can troubleshoot that, because I'm not sure if it's going to charge or not. So I'm reading up on that. This is one of the Ford 4G alternators, and I guess they can be a little bit tricky when you're doing them in a like a custom configuration like we are, where you're not using the computer to like talk to the alternator. I don't know if it does that or not, but those are the kinds of things that you read on the internet. Anyway, so we're going to be taking care of all those things, and then of course the last thing that we'll do is we will program the Holley system. I don't know if I'm going to go through that. I just there's a bazillion videos out there on programming the Holley system, and they're all going to be pretty similar. I think if you just read the Holley instructions, you're not going to have any problem with that. So stick with me, and we are going to jump in and tackle all these things. And I think I may even pick up a battery charger for this thing and hook up the charger for Michael so that he doesn't have to worry about doing that later. That way we'll just leave him a pigtail, and he can just plug in a battery charger or maintainer every time he stores the vehicle. So hang on. All right, next day, I have got the battery temporarily attached. I still have the Holley disconnected. I have the battery, the relay jumper installed in the fuse box. So we're just jumping terminal 30 and what is it, 87A on the relay, and I'm going to plug in the fuel pump. Because remember, this is hot all the time because it gets triggered by the Holley system, and it only comes on when it gets a source to close the relay from Holley. So with that, the fuel pump starts. You can hear it running. You can hear there's a lot more load on that fuel pump now. And we are up at, what is that, 55 pounds of pressure. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to bump that down, or bring that down to about 42, 43 pounds per the Ford recommended range. They basically give you a range of between 35 and 55 pounds. And so if you go, kind of in the middle of that, you end up at 42 or 43 pounds. So we're going to drop it down to there, and then we'll lock down the stop nut on there, and then we'll relieve the pressure in the system, and then we'll disconnect our little adapter that we have here. So as you saw on the bench, this adapter is 6AN swivel female, and then it is stationary 6AN male, and then it has an 1/8" NPT threaded slot in it for an adapter, and we have a Schrader valve screwed into there, and then my fuel pressure gauge, which I just showed you, this one, screws onto that, and it has an adapter. So it has this brass adapter, and then it has more of a knurled type connector that goes on top of that. So with all of that, I didn't see any leaks either this time. I I did start out today when I first connected the fuel pump at about 20 pounds, give or take. And so I set it to what I thought was going to be about 45, and then disconnected the fuel pump, and then I reconnected it just now when you guys saw it on camera. You can see it jumped way up. Before we're done, once we have the engine running and idling, we'll dial it in to exactly 43 pounds, verifying it with both this gauge and with the Holley pressure transducer that is supposed to register what the fuel pressure is on the screen. So let me grab some tools. I will readjust the fuel pressure regulator, and we'll get back at it. Trying this again. Fuel pump running. We're at, what is that, 55 still? So we're going to back it down. I'm turning this counterclockwise. And you can hear the load lighten up on the fuel pump. It'll get a little bit higher pitched as I bring this farther and farther down. So there we are. We're at, I'm going to call that 43, 44 pounds. And so then we're going to go ahead, we're going to take the stop nut, we're going to lock it down. Still holding at 43, it looks like. Every one of those marks is another 2 pounds. So we'll turn this off. We'll let it sit for a minute or so, and once it sits for usually about a minute, minute and a half, you'll see a little bit of pressure drop. This particular fuel pressure regulator doesn't like to hold pressure. It says Trick Flow on it, but it's actually made by Aeromotive, and I have a very similar one on Slytherin. The difference is the one on Slytherin actually goes into the fuel rail because it's like a Ford style in the way it mounts. It mounts on the Ford fuel rail, and so I found out very quickly when I started setting fuel pressure on that car that I would turn the ignition off, and then I would immediately see a drop where, like with the factory fuel pressure regulator, it would like hold for a while. And it's just a different style of fuel pressure regulator, and so it does that. So I like to go ahead and let it sit for a few minutes or seconds. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to reattach the fuel pump and see if any of the numbers change on the gauge. And it looks like we're holding steady at 43. So I'm going to call that good. We've got it all locked down. And the next thing we should be doing on this car is programming the Holley. Now, I don't think I'm going to fire it in this episode. It'll probably be the next video that we do that we'll fire it. But I want to get as much of the preliminary programming of the Holley done, so that the day that we fire it, I'm not chasing a bunch of things that I forgot to do. I would just want to fire it and then check the car overall, let it come to temperature, make sure the fan comes on, all that kind of good stuff, rather than chasing down little gremlins that I may have missed before I did the programming. So that is probably where I'll leave it, is just after programming the Holley stuff. And I don't know if I'm going to show you all that stuff, because there's a million other videos on YouTube about programming the Holley system. They're all kind of the same, but they're not all a 4.6 liter dual overhead cam engine. So, but the actual looking at the screen and the punching the buttons, I think it's going to be very similar. I'm kind of rambling on here. So hopefully there was a spot that I could edit this. If not, then you guys are going to see this all. But anyways, I'm going to get into the Holley right now, and I don't know how much of that I'm going to actually film. All right, one little tip from me to you. When you get into programming your Holley system, if your fuel pump is easily disconnected, meaning we kept the access cover off this purposely, one, to check for leaks, and two, to make it really easy to disconnect this thing, so we weren't turning on the fuel pump every time we were going in to make any adjustment on the Holley. Just leave it disconnected. That way you're not flooding the fuel rails with fuel every time. So the programming on the Holley system is done. The fuel pump does run when we turn the ignition key on. And now that we have the battery hooked up, I can turn the key and the Holley system will fire up. And then we can go to, I think it's monitor, and then multi-gauge, and then dash. And we now have dash. We now have sensors. So what we're monitoring on this is we're monitoring the fan, we're monitoring the coolant temperature sensor, the air-fuel ratio, the battery, the intake air position, and the oil pressure. The oil pressure we're not really monitoring. We're monitoring that with the gauge. With the Ford mod motor, it's kind of difficult to put two sensors in for the oil pressure without one hanging down low. And I just didn't want to risk that one that was hanging down low getting knocked off by a speed bump or something. So we're not monitoring that through the Holley. It is possible. We're just not doing it. We're just going to monitor ours through the gauge on the dash. So that part's done. I'm going to go ahead and turn the ignition off. And then the one thing that I want to say is I did talk to Holley support. And I asked them about the tachometer because I was concerned that the speed hut gauge has all these little different programming. Like you can do it for a coil on plug, and I think you use what is it, a half cycle, because an 8-cylinder is essentially a 4-stroke engine, and so you split that up, and 2 revolutions would be a quarter times 4, so it's a half cycle for 1 cylinder. And then it has, like, if you're doing a 4-cylinder, a 6-cylinder, or a standard 8-cylinder. And so I asked Holley what the output of the Terminator was in its stock form. And I didn't even ask if it was adjustable on their end. But they told me it was just standard 8-cylinder unless you're using their Terminator in a custom configuration and it's not actually an 8-cylinder engine. So that's the way I have it hooked up. I have it hooked up directly into the Speed Hut gauge, and I haven't changed anything. So the default on the Speed Hut gauge is for an 8-cylinder signal from like a standard distributor or coil. So we should be good on that. I shouldn't have to change anything, but once we go to fire the engine, we'll find out. I did have some time to take the Russ Thompson turn signal switch out, put it on the bench. I believe I have that all fixed now. So when it goes up into the right turn position, it does stay in position now. And then it does the same thing now when it goes down into the left. So I think I got that all squared away. All right, next day, I will have to say that it has been a very trying week. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish up this video with connecting a battery maintainer to the new battery that we have installed in Michael's car. I did stop by the home center because they had a really cool deal on one of the Vector battery charger / maintainers that they sell, and so I picked 2 of those up. And I'm not going to get into why I picked up 2, but I've got 2 of them. And ignore the computer on here. That's a completely different story. I don't want to go too far into it, but let's just say I had to retire a computer for my other business that crapped out, and there's a program on there that only will run with Windows XP, and so therefore the only computer I had that was old enough that would allow Windows XP to be loaded on it was the one that I use at my desk for the construction business. And so I lost that computer to the business, if that makes any sense. And I had to order another computer. So that's why this computer's sitting here. I just haven't had time to put it into service so far. So anyways, I stopped at the home center. And of course, while I was there, I found some other cool things that I had to have, because they've got all these cool Christmas sales going on, or Black Friday sales. So these are the chargers that I picked up. I've never used the Vector battery chargers before, so I'm curious to see how they work, or how well they work. But a lot of these are basically the same type of technology. There's a microprocessor inside of them that, you know, gives a condition of the battery, and they simply turn on when the battery drops down to a certain level. It brings them up to to top them off, and then it shuts off or puts them in a storage mode. So this one is going to go on to Michael's car, and then I think this one is probably going to go in the dually, and I may or may not get to that on another episode or another video. So let's we'll get this unwrapped. I'll get this installed into the battery box for Michael's car. Just remember, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to feed the pigtail through the back of the cover on this, even though, so we've got a hole right there with a grommet. I'm going to feed that through there. I may make that bigger. I may make it a bigger hole with a bigger grommet. And we're going to leave that to where it can be pulled off without having any issues. So basically, the pigtail in here should be long enough that I don't have to disconnect the pigtail or pull the pigtail through the actual cover. I should just be able to lay it off to the side. And we'll get that all installed, and I'll bring you back and show you what it looks like all installed. Alright, I grabbed the pigtail with the eyelets out of the box. You can see here, this is the quick disconnect for the charger. And I didn't like the way the eyelet was just too big on this side for the battery. I mean, it was huge. The negative side isn't bad. I mean, right now, other than the fact that it's thinner, it's about the same diameter on the inside as the one that I installed. And then I made sure I put some red heat shrink over the outside so we could identify the positive versus the negative. I'm going to get those hooked up onto the battery, and then we'll plug this thing in and we'll see how she works. Alright, one other thing was that I picked up these lights, and I thought they might come in handy when I was filming under the car. They seem to have a hook on them, which will allow them to be hung on a brake line or something like that while I'm under the car. And light it up for both me and the camera so you guys can see what I'm doing. And then I think they have a magnetic base as well. So I'll be able to stick them to anything that's steel or anything that a magnet will stick to. And I just figured, hey, I think they were like $14, $15 for a 3-pack. They even came with batteries. So we'll see how well these work out, and I'll give you guys a progress report on them as I start to use them. And there you have it. The charger's hooked up. It appears that the blinking light means it's charging, and that fully stored, it's going to go to a solid green light. We have it set to 12 volts. The one precaution I want to give you guys on these is make sure when you buy a charger that it matches whatever battery type you're using. So you want to make sure that if you have an AGM battery, which is an absorbed glass mat, or you have a gel-filled battery, that the charger that you're using is going to be compatible with that. And everything I read on this charger says that it is good for all those different types of batteries. So we're ready to go on this thing. So I'm going to let this thing charge up. It shouldn't be too far down, because we've only had a couple of pulls on the starter so far on it, and I fully charged the battery once it arrived here from the speed shop. So that part of it should be good. I'm going to thank you guys all for watching. As always, if you enjoy this kind of stuff that we do around the shop, do the like, the share, the subscribe. Any questions you may have or comments, put those down in the comments sections, and we'll be sure to look at those and respond to them accordingly. And we will see you guys all next time. Have a great day.